Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for our free monthly webinar. Each time that we make decisions about what the topic should be, and if you have a favorite topic that we haven't covered recently, you can always share that with us. But I've become very interested in behavioral economics. And apparently, our community is just as interested because of the very large enrollment that we have for today's webinar with Dr. Saram Hashmat. And we're so happy to have him with us. And together, he and I are going to get you introduced and familiar with behavioral economics. And to get started, we try to make this session as interactive as possible. We'd love to know what you're thinking. So we have some polls, and I am going to do our very first poll. So let me launch it. We would like to find out, the rest of the polls are about the content, but I'd really be interested in knowing how you found out about this webinar. We share it in many different places, as you can see, and knowing which ones get the most exposure is very helpful, because we want our community to know what we're doing. We put a lot of time and effort into these webinars. Let's see. Almost 80% of you have voted, so I will go ahead and close this and share it with you. So, I'm really happy to know that the majority of you are already part of our financial social work community. By the way, if you find out about it in a different way, feel free to put that in the question box for us. Vonda, can everybody see the poll? Because I can't.
I can see the poll.
Okay.
Rita.
If you can see it, I'm sorry. Vonda, my assistant, is also on the call. Thanks, Vonda. Okay,
You're welcome.
let's hide that and get on with the webinar. So because we know we always have new people at the webinar, we're going to tell you a little bit about financial social work. And that should help you understand why we do this free webinar every month. So we know after 20 years of this work, actually closer to 21, that financial health is about much more than dollars and cents. Okay, well, we are going backwards. So, okay. Actually, this is what we feel money is all about. We know that our model is a behavioral change model, and it begins with the fact that we all have a relationship with our money and a relationship with ourselves. And it's those two relationships, how they come together, that really drives our financial behavior. And I will say this a few times throughout the webinar and hope that you'll all remember it. It's something I often do in trainings. Financial behavior incorporates how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. So it's as simple as that and as complicated as that, or as we make it. So what it's all about is that our financial behavior determines our financial circumstances. And that is where financial behavioral change happens. Our financial circumstances are determined by how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. So I talked about our relationship with ourselves. So how we feel about ourselves, our self-confidence, self-acceptance, self-esteem. And again, our behavior, how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. So those two are significant components. Certainly as important, if not more important, about the dollars and cents of financial well-being. And we have a more in-depth look at what we call our whole person financial health model. We launched a new financial social work ebook for Financial Literacy Month in April, and you can download that free from our website, and it goes further into depth on the fact you see where we start: money, self, behavior, then how others influence us financially, how society impacts us, how where we are in the life cycle, and our health. All of these are part of financial well-being. We also have a financial life cycle model because we need to start early with young people to expose them age appropriately to what money is and what it does and why it matters. So preteens, we should be talking about it. Adolescents should be having hands-on experiential learning. Young adults practicing and practically learning about money. And in adulthood, it's all about financial reality. And for older adulthood, passing on the knowledge and passing on any assets. So the model is ongoing. It's highly experiential and very behaviorally oriented. It includes ongoing financial education, motivation, validation, and support that comes from the nature we built into it of it being interactive, introspective, and strengths-based. It works individually and or with groups, and many of our graduates use it to practice financial therapy. Our psychodynamic model components include Mazarow's transformative learning model and the trans-theoretical model of behavioral change. It's all part of all of our work and of our financial social work certification. It's important to know, and this is very foundational to our work, that dollars and cents don't make our financial choices. It's actually our inner money self. And we each have an inner money self. And if we had more time, I would ask you to close your eyes and connect with your inner money self. Introduce yourself and see what you can learn from your inner money self. Because that's where our financial circumstances are based. That's where we make our financial choices from. Your money self includes your thoughts, feelings, and actions with your money and with yourself. So financial healing precedes financial well-being. We refer to the healing component as addressing the emotional, physical, mental, and psychological damage and challenges of the financial problems that so many people have. And financial well-being means embracing the financial component of your life so money is not a constant concern and stressor. It's about being and feeling more in control of your money. Because if you don't feel in control of your money, if you're not in control of your money, you can never be in control of your life. So those are some of the basic pieces of financial social work. Our goal, well, we have many goals and they're listed in that new ebook, but we do try to bring peace around money to our students, our graduates, and our clients. Because someone with a healthier money self engages more readily, is much more hopeful, is more eager to change, and we need to help clients be in a place where they're ready to change. And then they are more prepared to succeed. So now we're going to go into this wonderful behavioral economics portion. And I'm going to do it a little bit with you before I turn it over to Dr. Hashmat. So I would like to know your interest level, what you're thinking about when it comes to behavioral economics. Really very interesting. Pretty split. And believe it or not, well, you haven't seen the results yet, but I came at it pretty much the same way most of you did. Okay, almost 80% of you have voted. If you want to vote, I'll count it down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And thank you all for participating. We have the greatest audiences. Okay, let's take a look at that then. So, as part of you had some of you had never heard of it before. To be honest, it's only in the past year that I've become so engaged by it and so enthusiastic about it. So I really was excited to be able to offer this as a webinar. So some of you know the basics, and there's some of you who may know more than I do. So we're going to hide that, and let's see if I can get this going right. Okay, so let's take a look to start off at traditional economics. So economics is the study of how people choose to use their scarce resources in an attempt to satisfy their unlimited wants. I think that's a pretty good definition. But now I'm okay. So traditional models of economic behavior assume, and we all know about assume, people will be and make logical money decisions to achieve the best outcome. Oh, if only that were true. But in reality, the problem is that people tend to make irrational money decisions, and that's a problem. So economists typically assume people make rational choices. We weigh them, we look at the pros and cons, we consider all of the readily available information, and we make those decisions individually. Well, if you're following this line of thinking and you think to the last financial choice you made, you're going to know pretty quickly that's not usually the process. So most of us are not calculating rationalists, merely seeking to maximize our own utility in a world of perfect information. I really love that quote. And anybody that thinks that would definitely be wrong. And that's one of the reasons that I find behavioral economics so perfect, and so tied into the work that we do at the Center for Financial Social Work. So what this is about is that behavioral economists that have identified a range of biases resulting from how people think and feel. They recognize that people aren't always self-interested, benefits maximizing, and cost minimizing with these very stable preferences. Thinking is subject to insufficient knowledge, feedback, and processing capability. That's the reality. So behavioral economists understand that financial choices often involve uncertainty, that most choices aren't the result of careful deliberation, that people tend to resist change, be poor predictors of future behavior, be subject to distorted memory, be affected by physiological and emotional states. Very true. People are social animals with social preferences like trust and reciprocity and fairness. So we're all susceptible to social norms and a need for self-consistency. Consumer behavior that makes us happy isn't always the best financial move, dollars and cents wise. If it makes us happy to buy something that we can't afford, that's not a really healthy financial move. So understanding irrational financial decisions can be useful not only to predict illogical choices, but to influence economic behavior. And I think that by the end of this webinar, you will be looking at the rest of the world and at consumerism from a different perspective as a result of what we're about to do together. So this has been studied by economist Richard Thaler, winner of the 2017 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. So I like this quote. When an economist says the evidence is mixed, he or she means that theory says one thing and data says the opposite. What he's talking about there is that traditional economics views humans as robotic machines making calculated decisions based on logic, when in reality, we're humans as irrational, emotional beings influenced by biases and experiences in our decision making. So there you have it. Traditional economics is the theory, and behavioral economics is the reality. And I hope our guest speaker is okay with my definitions. So now we are going to turn this over to Dr. Hashmat, and he will share a little about himself, and then we will get started on his part of the webinar. Thank you so much for being here, Sharam.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I live in Chicago, Central Time, and as Rita, wonderful with that introduction, made my life a lot easier. Just a little bit, few things about me. I spent most of my adult life studying behavior economics, and behavior economics wasn't really as formalized as it used to be, and combination of economics and psychology apply to human behavior, but I kind of focus mostly on addictive behavior and health behavior, and this has a much relevance to the way we make choices in the context of money, and that's what the focus of today's lecture is. Rita, next slide, please.
I'm trying, Hashmat.
Okay. Well,
there you go. There you go.
I know. Okay. The next the topic is basically it's as Rita made an introduction about behavioral economics. It's really a combination of psychology and basic traditional economics. At the same time, also this field also makes prediction. The prediction is that we can tell with certainty that people have a tendency to make a biased decision, and the goal is ultimately to perhaps move them toward more rational behavior. But to do so, we need to know where, at what situation, context, people make mistakes. So once we are aware of those errors, then we can nudge and push them for more logical decision making. So next slide, please. Okay, here it is. Yeah, we kind of covered this. Now we can move to the next one. So what I'm going to, well, okay, let's start with, well, before we take the poll, let me just kind of give you an introduction about the topics. So here it is, we are trying to understand that in the context of how people make mistake or biased decision making in the context of money. So I have identified 10 reasons why people overspend, which really comes from the application of behavior economics. So here it is. So we can do the polls, and then we kind of see what's the other, the audience's perspective on that. What drives people to spend too much?
Okay, we've opened that poll.
Wow.
Oh, can everybody see? Can you see that you can choose more than one on this one? We do have great, very smart people in our audiences. And I didn't, go ahead. Okay.
Very much split so far, what I see. It's
exactly. It's very interesting. I forgot to tell all of you that we are recording this, and you will receive the recording next week. So we don't share the slides, but that's why we record it for you. So we have over 80% have voted, so we'll close it, and everyone can see what a smart group we have. Go ahead, you go ahead.
Well, that's interesting. The winner is that easier to spend money with credit card, paying off and these are all important reasons, and we will be kind of touching on these ideas that you already have some suspicions that what really causes overspending. Just a little bit background, when I was approaching these topics, because my field was addiction, because addictive behavior is such a excessive behavior, it can also apply to food. You can also kind of have a similar analogy why we eat too much, and of course the same concept apply here. When it's a credit card, it's easier to spend than using real cash. I'll come back to that. Rita, please, next slide. Then we can go on the real culprits behind overspending. Okay, so the number one, I mean, these are not really organized by the importance. It's just these are the kind of the concept that they're all been discussed in the literature, but I kind of combined this in a 10-point, make your life a lot easier than reading all these articles and books about that. So number one is opportunity cost neglect. If any of you taken economic class, I'm hoping that this is the one topic that is the most important topics discussed in economics. And it basically, opportunity cost means that whatever we do in life, there's a price. In other words, I remember my first lesson in economics was that there is no free lunch. You can think about money or time. You do something, that means that you cannot do something else. If you decide to be educated, be a financial advisor, that means that you cannot be an engineer. If you spend your time reading, watching TV, that time is not allowed to spend with loved one, and so on. So a lot of time when it comes to money, sometimes we neglect that there is no other alternative use for this money. And when we ignore opportunity costs, we really end up acting kind of against our own best interests. So it's really important that emphasize that in terms of using our limited resources, that this important concept is really crucial. We need to keep that in mind. Next slide, please. Okay, so this mental accounting is very intuitive concept, and it discussed really in behavioral economics. Basically means that we intuitively separate our money in a different pots. For example, all the college students known for that. I mean, I have kids in college, they graduated. They usually set aside their money set aside for tuition, money set aside for meal, money set aside for fun. Now, this is a wonderful way because then you can, it allows us to kind of track the way we allocate our money, we spend money, and we kind of stay on budget. So it's a wonderful technique that, again, we use intuitively. But here it is, there's a downside to that. Sometimes, which is really also fundamental failure. I mean, this goes against economics. Money is money, but in our mind, money is not the same money. So let me give example, personal example. I remember one time my daughter was behind her student loan, and I gave her a birthday gift, money. But she was reluctant to use that money to pay her student loan because she assumed that, or she perceived that that's a free money. So it's not that you can use for a student loan. And so we have a tendency to do that. For example, when we get tax refund, we treat that as a free money and we can indulge with that rather than maybe perhaps that money just can go to the same pot and use for other purposes. So to remedy that is that we need to, the alternative to having a mental account is to consciously compare all your purchases. So again, that comes here, the concept of opportunity cost comes to play. Next slide, please. So again, this special occasion also comes from a dieting. We have a tendency to abstain on the special occasion like birthday, Christmas, and we don't keep track of it. As a result, we have a tendency to overspend money. And again, the special occasion, very extreme case of mental accounting. And a lot of people, by the way, they set aside money for in advance for Christmas shopping and Christmas gift. So that way they are much more prepared, and so that kind of avoid overspending. Next slide, please. Present bias. Okay, this is a concept that it's very again typical in behavior economics. Basically, present bias means that it's impulsive behavior. By the way, most of us have this tendency to value present compared to future. And it's kind of touches also on personalities. Some personalities are very impulsive, especially younger people. As we get older, we become more future-oriented. As we get very, very old, also we act just like the children. We have because we have a time horizons get becoming shorter, we focus more on present. This impulsive behavior also, in a way, encourages us to spend more money now than not worrying about future. One more thing I just want to kind of mention that we kind of, because of the time, we kind of briefly talked about behavior economics. The difference between behavior economics and the traditional economics is that we try to model mind as a two element. One is the emotion and one is the logical thinking. If you think about that, a lot of time, the pure economic never talks about emotion, but the reality is that a lot of our decision making is very emotional and also impulsive. So anytime we want to do things at the moment, we're so excited, you buy some piece of item, you want to spend money, and that really engages our emotion. And a lot of time when you go to store, marketers, they're more interested to really engage your emotion rather than just you engage in reflective mind. So we need to be aware of this bias. Next slide, please. Okay, now time for poll. How do we avoid pain of pain?
Okay. Polls. Okay. Launch. You can also choose more than one on this poll. While you're all voting, I want to mention that you can submit your questions in the question box. And at the end of the webinar, we will be answering those questions. Okay. All right. We're almost at 80%. All right. I'll go ahead and close the poll and share it with all of you. Okay. Yes, that good old universal credit card mentality. Been around for a very long time. Go ahead.
Well, as you can see from this poll, that it reflects our our behavior related to this present bias, because as you can see that, especially in modern life, a lot of younger people these days no longer use cash, and everybody uses credit card and or the digital commerce, and we just don't ever see cash, and that makes spending a lot easier. So if you move to next slide, elaborate on this.
All right, I'll hide that and get us to the next slide. Okay.
Okay, so here it is, another concept from behavioral economics, that hard cash versus credit, how that affects our behavior when it comes to spending. Paying with cash is more painful than paying with card. Anybody knows that anytime you go to gas station, if you use cash versus credit card, you are more aware of what's going on. In fact, study shows that even in the state when we go through and we pay the tolls by cash versus just the easy pass, people notice that price is going up. When you just use your card, you don't notice that if they change prices. So the main psychological force of credit card is that it separates pleasure of buying from pain. So we really don't notice the pain, but we notice the pain, pleasure more than. In a way, credit card, you think about, it's almost like alcohol. It's kind of a effect of our information processing. And and that's what the result becomes, that we have a tendency to spend more. So here it is, one quick solution that at least this is based on a research, shows that if you want to get your spending under control, maybe eliminate credit card. Just I've done this myself, just for 1 week, use cash. You notice that you're spending, first of all, you become more conscious, and your spending will change. So, I'm sorry, next.
That's okay. If I had thought about it, everybody, I would have had a poll asking you the last time you spent cash. And I'm willing to bet it wasn't that recently. I know it wasn't for me. So think about that. We are very disconnected from our money for all the reasons that you said, Dr. Hashmat.
That's Yeah, by the way, people hardly touch money anymore. It's okay. So the next concept is, again, this comes from literature in eating behavior. It's known as also addiction, the what the hell effect. In the context of the eating behavior, dieters have noticed that people are constant diet. If they have eating any forbidden food, like a brownie, piece of brownie, all of a sudden their mindset shift. They say, oh, I just ruined my diet, I might as well just eat the whole thing. Well, guess what? That the same concept applies to the money. You think about, if you have a $3,000 monthly credit bill, spending $100 is not a big deal. But if you have zero credit card balance, $100 is a big deal. So we need to be aware of this, that how mindset shifts. So, the money is money, but for some reason that $100 in the context of $3,000, it just seems nothing. So anyway, so next slide, please. So again, this is the concept of willpower is a very important concept in psychology. If you can think about willpower as the energy you have, it's not a physical energy, it's more of a psychological energy, and especially it's related to cognition. if you probably sitting through seminar or lecture for 1 hour, for some reason after 1 hour your mind start wandering, and because you're paying attention, and or if you're at the end of the day you're so stressed out, and what happened when we are stressed out, we run out of this juice, we become more impulsive. So in other words, our mind shifts from deliberation to impulse. That's what we want at the end of the day. Most of the diets are known broke at the end of the day. Nobody eats ice cream in the morning, but at night after work. So the willpower, the same thing takes place in the context of shopping. When the willpower is depleted, and you're in a shopping mall, and at Christmas time, all these distractions, if you're with a kid, baby crying, we have a tendency to move from reflective mind to impulsive mind, and also buy more. So we need to be aware of this. Perhaps always make sure that we're not depleted in our willpower. By the way you replenish willpower is get plenty of rest, and so not to do a lot of decision at the same time. So next slide, please. Okay, so the next slide is the retail therapy, which is important concept in psychology. This is a joke, says when the going gets tough, tough goes shopping. And we have a tendency when we are in a negative feeling or negative mood, we have a tendency we're motivated to get back to the balance, to equilibrium. In other words, we want to get rid of this negative feeling. And if people have discovered that in the past, whatever that their coping mechanism, some people they drink, some people eat ice cream, and some people go shopping. And shopping is a way of also reducing our negative feeling. And by the way, what happened in the long run, we establish association. It's kind of a Pavlovian. And so anytime you're in a negative mood, it triggers that you need to do some shopping, perhaps online. So, okay, next slide. I think it's time for a poll.
I think it is, if I can get us there. Okay, last poll. Here we go. I think you can also choose more than one on this. Okay.
Okay.
Let's give you a few more seconds. Very revealing. Okay, okay. And share.
Okay. Wow, wonderful. These are, by the way, they are symptom of shopaholics, and the audience are wonderful. They hit it all, and so the majority voted for having unopened or tagged item in your closet. What, by the way, one more things before we get into this shopaholics. The study shows that at some time, people with shopping addiction, they become hoarders. So in other words, they have a lot of stuff in their house, they're unopened. That's also another sign of compulsive buying. So if we can move to next slide.
I just want to mention that I have worked with clients with most of these challenges. And I'd like to point out that on our YouTube channel, I think it's a little over a year ago, we did have a webinar on stopping over shopping. That was for the holiday season. But if you'd like to examine some more of that, you can. All right,
Okay.
okay, there you go.
All right. So very briefly, I mean, this is very obviously it's a big topic, and I just want to put in the behavioral economics in the context of overspending. Now, here it is. We're no longer talking about overspending. This is kind of crossed the line. This has become more pathological, and I don't think so. A lot of people suffer from this, but there are. It's a compulsive buying is a very similar to at least in the literature. Notice that it's kind of impulse control problem, very similar to binge eating and gambling. And what I mean compulsive is that it's you just want to do it over and over, and you have these intrusive thoughts like you just have to do it, and seems like you have no control over your choices. And the statistic shows that it varies, but overall shows that 6% of the population could be considered as compulsive buyer. By the way, again, the statistic varies. 80% of these individuals tend to be women, but in the context of growing e-commerce, online shopping, also men's are becoming more in the same category. They're more and more stuff. So it seems like both sexes equally becoming, sort of a target with this kind of behavior, are vulnerable to compulsive buying. Next item, please. Okay, so addiction shopping, unlike other addiction, which takes hold in spending early ages, for example, in terms of context of alcohol, cigarette, most people, they start smoking cigarette maybe at age 16, 17. Hardly people start smoking maybe at age 20, 22. But that's very different in the context of shopping. It really develops at age 30s because this is a time that they have established financial independence. So they have money. Addiction is only prevalent in developing countries. You kind of wonder why is that? Guess what? Because of the credit card. Again, that credit card makes shopping easier, painless, and that's why also kind of feeds into this sort of behavior. So, well, I guess if you notice that I've listed some of the items, and I think Rita mentioned that this is discussed in the YouTube. You can refer to that to what can be done about it. So I'm not sure there's one more slide left, Rita. Oh, okay. So finally, this is this concept of self-justification. Again, we go back to the behavioral economics, which really, in a way, it explains our behavior, that why we are rational. And guess what? We, as a human being, we don't like to be perceived as irrational. So whatever decision we make, we like to perceive as we are doomed for a reason. And that's why if you ask anyone why you did this, they always come up with reason or rational. This really, the saying goes that rational and rationale, there's only very similar. So we tend to have a justification. For example, if you ask someone, if you bought certain things so expensive, you didn't need this, that person will probably come up with a justification of because it was on sale. So here it is. You can see that there's a logical reason why this person behaved that way. Of course, that justification not necessarily correct, but there's always reason. A lot of time, by the way, if you look at your own choices, I can speak for myself, we do a lot of things. We don't know why we did it, but we can come up with a justification for that. And the reason is that goes back to our initial discussion. We have a tendency to make decisions based on emotion, not necessarily reasoning. And the problem is that a lot of time we don't really have access to our emotion. We can always access to our reasoning because we thought about that. We don't have access to our emotion, and when we try to make justification, we speak in the context of as if we are reasoning. We have a logical reason. By the way, that's a reason when people suffer from mental illness, they have to see a psychologist. They cannot diagnose themselves. And the same thing happens with self-justification. So the next slide, please. I'm not sure we're done, perhaps, or there's one more.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wind this down before the Q&A. And Dr. Hatchman and I will be answering your questions. You can put them into the question box now. I did want to point out, I think this gives you at least some idea of the common cognitive biases when making decisions and judgments. There are a lot of them. There are way more than we have time to discuss right now, but I thought this might be of interest to some of you. So I just wanted to point out that even when we're unaware of it, our cognitive biases impact our lives. They impact all of our lives. And businesses and marketers use this knowledge to sell us products. And I'm going to show you one or two quick examples here as we wind down. Because the more you know about this, the more you'll understand some of your own financial behaviors and those of your clients. So more socially conscious organizations use behavioral economics to improve the health and well-being of their clients. And other businesses use it to improve their bottom line. An example of a socially conscious organization would be in a cafeteria, placing the healthy foods, the fruits and vegetables at the front of the line instead of the desserts and the unhealthy foods at the head of the line. And there's lots of research that proves that those kinds of nudges, as Dr. Hastram spoke about at the beginning, they really make a difference. So the more we understand the irrational behavior of ourselves and our clients, the more we can support better decision making. So behavioral economics in the real world, you can see outside of this store, shop now, wear now, pay later. Sharon, maybe you could tell me which of those biases that appeals to, but it's interest free also. So now go ahead.
Rita, I was just going to say that this is a very good example of present bias. You can tell that shop now, everything is now, and it says interest free. In other words, there's no pain in the long run, just everything comes right now. So anyway, I just want to point it out. Go ahead.
I appreciate that. I'm trying to juggle a couple of things here and I couldn't focus in on which bias it is. I just wanted everybody, there you go, short-term bias, another term for it, to remember that when you're out shopping, these are the things that are happening. I've seen signs in dressing rooms. You know you want it, go ahead and buy it. Whoa, okay, if you say so. Here's another one. In the real world, I really don't like this one. It makes me very nervous when I'm trying to book an airline and they're telling me either there's, 73 other people looking at the same flights, or like this, there's only 6 left at this price. There's only 9 left. A lot of pressure. And you can see on this other one that... Go ahead.
Rita, before you move, this is a very good example. They also do on a TV, when they're selling item, they say only 5 left. They're really appealing to your emotion because they're saying that there's a pressure. You need to act right now or end of the world. So there's only 9 seats left and you need to purchase right now. Again, this is not appealing to your reflective mind, appealing to your emotional brain. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rita.
No, I appreciate that. Plus, to be honest with you, now I wish I had a way to just instantly ask a poll here, because I don't know about all of you, but I really resent them doing it to me, and it stresses me out, and it makes me not want to make the purchase at that time. So I'm not sure what that's about. Sharon.
Right.
So airlines use loss aversion, so that's a bias, to influence customer choice of payment method. And of course, they put your credit cards as the first option. But we all know that with the growth of online shopping and the inability to pay cash for those, it's going to make a difference. I thought this one was interesting because they're trying to make us think about eating at a different time. Because if we all want to eat at noon, then they're going to be slammed and there might not be enough food or tables. So why don't we just go eat at 11 o'clock? So this is one final one with flu vaccinations. So traditional interventions seek to change behavior by altering the cost-benefit calculation that people take when making a decision, except that that's not where our heads are at. So this is a nudge approach that one agency used to address inertia, procrastination, and forgetfulness. And I should have done a poll here. So which do you think worked better, having participants actively commit to a specific date and time to get vaccinated, or having them opt out of a schedule that the agency sent for them? Well, scheduling their own appointment through this nudge was way more successful, 40% higher success. Okay, so we're finishing up. I just wanted to tell you that our certification has 20 CEUs included. It is self-study and self-paced, and we have graduates across the country and around the world. And you can see today's webinar. Next month, we have helping clients cope with the cost of medical care. And our August webinar is how to become a student debt survivor. You can register for all of those right now on our website. This is I mentioned this at the beginning, our financial social work new ebook launched in April. You can get that on the website. We also have a free journey of financial self-discovery. Every month we have a free download that you can use with clients. So we're halfway into the year. Those are also on the website. So here we are. You will receive the recording next week. The slides are proprietary. They are not shared. But we will now open up the question box. So, Wanda, did you, is there a difference between behavioral economics and behavioral finance?
Okay, that's very simple. Basically, it's really, behavioral economics is very general, and that's just applied specifically to finance. The same thing, behavioral economics apply to public health, which is kind of my field, but a lot of people also apply this to in the context of financial transactions. So that's the differences. More applied, specific.
Someone asked about the gift cards. We used a gift card in one of those polls, and a gift card is, people give gift cards for birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas. So when people use their gift card, they're not spending their own money. So do people tend to spend more with a debit card compared to a cash card? And this person's wondering because of the money disconnect. I know we talk a lot about being disconnected from your money. You don't see it, you don't touch it, you don't think about it. Do you know statistically anything about that?
Well, I'm not aware of statistically, but we can also conceptually speak to this in the context of, we just talked about that. First of all, the gift card goes back to mental accounting. You remember, it's the same thing as different between the bonus and rebate. When you get money in terms of rebate, you feel like that's your money you deserve, but you get something bonus, it seems like it's something different. The concept is these names, language makes so much difference. In a gift card, when we give someone for a birthday, in other words, that's free. They can spend anything they want. But the credit card is different. People have a tendency to spend more on a gift card than a credit card. So again, how they perceive if it's free or it belongs to some sort of category and influence their behaviors. That's all I can tell, in the context of mental accounting.
Someone shared, I probably said at one point that, when I mentioned about the last time that our audience had used cash, and someone shared that I would lose that bet because this person's family does all cash spending. And I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. What causes individuals who have been financially strapped that when they get money, they spend it versus saving or investing? This is towards the youth population. What can be done to curb this behavior?
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about the questions. Would you repeat?
I think the question is, if you've been poor or really struggling financially and come into some money, an inheritance, a bonus check, a gift. So how come someone in that situation doesn't choose to save it or invest it and just runs out and spends it?
Well, Rita, you could probably speak to this better. I would recommend that come to the seminar, your website, your workshop. These are wonderful places in terms of educating ourselves about the financial literacy and the decision making. That's all I can think about. I can't think about any better way of what you're presenting here. It's a wonderful opportunity to learn about it. That's all I can think about.
Thank you, Sharam. Listen, it's not a yes or no or an easy question to answer. Financial social work is heavily psychosocial, so we explore the thoughts, feelings, and attitudes that drive behavior, which is how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. And those are the exact pieces that make us practice these behaviors. And now we start to explore these biases that we knew nothing about, but that are very real, as you've learned in the past hour. So we do have a lot of information on our website, a lot of free things, and we also have the certification for working with clients. Can you say a bit more about how to keep willpower resources well stocked so as to avoid our consumption?
This is a very interesting question, and it's a huge literature in the psychology of dieting and also addiction. Everybody knows, it's very well known that number one cause of relapse in addiction is low willpower. Here it is, a few things you need to watch for it. When you are stressed, I'm talking about mentally stressed, watch out. That's not a good time to make decision, because the negative feelings, it really forces you to focus and get rid of that negative feeling, and it makes us impulsive. So that's number one. And so when also making decision, when people make a lot of decision, for example, anybody's newlywed, when they are planning for their wedding, they have to make so many detailed decisions, and they are so exhausted. So anytime, if you're making so many decisions, that really eats up your cognitive resources. You become mentally exhausted. So here are the better way to do. Maybe sometime you need to take a walk, exercise, get a good night's sleep. And also sometimes expert talks about, for example, in terms of taking time, cooling off period. For example, if you want to buy something, you're so excited, just wait 24 hours, give yourself a time. And if you really want that after 24 hours, buy it. For example, in Amazon.com, you can put things on your cart, and come back next day. And I bet, if I'm guessing, most of the time you'll forget what was that you put there. So if that's the case, you save money. And so I hope these few tips are helpful.
One other acronym that I'm familiar with from the addictions field is the word HALT, H-A-L-T. And
Oh, yeah.
I
Go ahead.
believe it means that you should never practice any of the addictions, whether it's eating or drinking or drugging, and certainly with spending, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. HALT. Don't do it if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So someone shared a lengthy question with the bottom line being, how do you assess compulsive versus rational buying?
The definition of compulsive is that it really comes from the compulsive disorder behavior. Somebody constantly, they get these thoughts in their mind that there's contaminations. So compulsive behavior that, you spend 2 hours doing something just automatically without thinking. So when you talk about compulsion, that means that the rationality is out of the window. There is no rational thinking. There is no deliberation. You just do things automatically. And so it's a compulsion is kind of a negative connotation in psychology. So I think that's probably I can give the definition. It's no rationality, no logical thinking. You just do it automatically. So,
have you looked at interventions on a logical progression of sessions to assist clients in looking at how these biases affect their choices and increase chances of making different choices?
I can just briefly, when I was reading literature that prepare for this, there are some of these biases that we talked about that they have implemented and that really have made a really significant difference on people's behavior. For example, in the context of a mental, like we talked about, when people were hired, they said, for example, for retirement, they set aside money specifically for retirement, and they noticed that over the years they had more saving compared to people that they didn't sort of segregated their money in different accounts. So the other concept that this is really well established, empirically shown that when people use the time cooling off period, in other words, they don't act impulsively, it really impacts their behavior. And also, finally, we talked about cash and versus credit card. The study has shown that consistently, when people don't use credit card, they manage their credit card, or perhaps somehow they're able to monitor their spending behavior. That could be also using cash. Not necessarily you have to use that, but somehow you're monitoring your credit spending. It really affects people's spending behavior. So,
great advice. Someone typed in FOMO, and I know what that is. So that is fear of missing out. And that is definitely a bias and a reason that people overspend or spend when they had committed not to spend. So that is another one. And a number of people asked about what's a good way to begin budgeting and moving towards responsible spending habits. That kind of, well, that's way beyond our time limit here, and isn't a yes or no, or again, there's no simple explanation. I will remind you again that we do have some great free downloads on our website that could help you with all of that. But someone also asked about what would, that I had talked about someone behaving in a healthy manner with their money, and what would that look like? Well, that would look like knowing how much money you have, knowing where that money needs to go, planning your spending ahead, and as Sharon just said, it definitely means paying attention to where your money is going, what you're doing with it. We can't be in a healthy, until we take control of our money, we will never be in control of our lives. I've learned that from all of the speaking and clients that I've seen and worked with through the years. So they're very tied into each other. So we need to spend time with our money to know who we owe to whom we owe, how much we have, how much we earn. We can't just remain so disconnected because it allows us to deny the reality of what's happening with our money and to avoid dealing with our money. And that's where it becomes very problematic. So being on top of your money is when you're going to start to feel much better about your financial circumstances. And let's see if we can take one more. Someone did ask about inner money self. Think about it. Think about, the things you do with your money and where those decisions are coming from. And it's not like your dollars and cents are going to, jump out and, decide where they want to be spent. So I think I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I really want to thank Dr. Hashmat. This was so much fun and so interesting. And I hope we can do it again sometime. And lots of people are saying thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.